There was a night. Perhaps you have had one like it, when you lay awake, replaying a conversation, searching every word you said for the crack, the flaw, the misstep that made someone turn cold. You rehearsed your explanation for tomorrow. You built your defense. You imagined finally saying the thing that would make them see you, truly see you, the way you have spent your whole life aching to be seen. And somewhere around 3 in the morning, exhausted from your own mind, a terrible question rose up in the dark and would not go back down. What if they never do? What if you explain yourself perfectly for the rest of your life to people who were never going to listen? And what if that is not a tragedy, but a doorway? That question is where I want to begin tonight. Not with comfort, not yet, with the question that empties you out before it fills you back up. I am not going to tell you that you are too sensitive. You have heard that sentence enough times to last several lifetimes, and I suspect it has done you no good at all. It has only taught you to apologize for the very faculty that lets you feel the temperature of a room before anyone speaks, that lets you hear the sentence beneath the sentence, that lets you sit with a grieving stranger and know without being told exactly where the wound is. That is not a flaw in your instrument. That is the instrument working exactly as it was built to work. What I want to talk about tonight is not your sensitivity. It is what you have been doing with it, and what becomes possible when you stop doing that thing once, once and for all. Because here is the quiet tragedy that lives inside almost every deeply feeling person I have ever known. Somewhere very early, you learned that being understood was the same thing as being safe. A parent's face would soften when you explained yourself well enough. A friend would stay when you found the right words for your pain. And so a belief took root, so early you cannot remember planting it, that your worth was conditional on your comprehensibility, that you had to be translatable to be lovable. And from that belief grew a lifelong project, exhausting and unfinished, of trying to make yourself legible to people who, for reasons that were never about you, simply could not or would not read the language you were written in. I want to describe to you tonight what lies on the other side of that project, not the abandonment of it, its completion. Because there is, if you are willing to walk through fire to find it, a final stage. A stage where the empath stops needing to be understood at all and discovers, to their own astonishment, that this is not the death of connection, but its resurrection in a form too solid to be shaken. Let us begin where the wound begins, because I do not trust any healing that skips the wound. The empathic person is, from the first, an instrument tuned to other frequencies. As a child, you likely knew things you were never told, that your mother's smile was covering something, that the silence at dinner had a shape, that your friend's laughter that afternoon was armor and not joy. You knew these things the way you know your own heartbeat, without evidence, without argument. simply knowing. And what did the world do with a child who knew such things? In most cases, it did not celebrate this gift. It grew suspicious of it. It called the child dramatic, oversensitive too much. It asked the child to prove what could not be proven, to justify a perception that operated beneath the threshold of language. And so the child, you, learned the great compromise that would shape a whole life. I will explain myself. I will find the words. If I just find the right words, they will finally understand, and then I will be safe. Do you see the trap already forming? Understanding became the toll paid at the bridge to belonging. And because the empath so often loves people who cannot or will not pay that toll back, who take without translating, who receive comfort without offering comprehension in return, a strange and lopsided arrangement calcifies over years. You become fluent in everyone. Almost no one becomes fluent in you. You are the interpreter at a summit where you are also, quietly, one of the delegates whose language nobody has bothered to learn. This is not weakness. I want to be very clear about that because the culture around you will try to tell you it is, that your need to be understood is neediness, that your hurt at being misread is fragility. It is neither. It is the entirely reasonable response of a nervous system that was taught in the cradle that comprehension and safety were the same currency. You are not broken for wanting to be understood. You are human and more than human. You are an especially attuned human, asking the world to offer you the same fluency you have spent a lifetime offering it. But here is the difficulty, and I ask you to sit with it rather than flinch from it. Not everyone has the capacity to understand you. Some people lack the inner architecture, not from malice, but from the simple fact that you cannot receive a frequency your instrument was never built to pick up. Others have the capacity, but not, in this season of their life, the willingness. Understanding you would cost them a reckoning with themselves they are not yet ready to have. And some, let us be honest about this too, will refuse to understand you precisely because understanding you would require them to change, and change is the one thing the unexamined life will defend against with everything it has. So you are left with a choice that feels, at first, like despair. You can keep explaining yourself to those who cannot or will not hear you, spending the only currency you have, your one life, your one store of energy, on a transaction that will never close. Or you can find another way to stand in the world. Tonight I am here to tell you that other way exists. It is not resignation. It is not withdrawal, dressed up as peace. It is something far more radical, and it has a name, though the name matters less than the territory it describes. I will simply call it the final stage. Before we can reach that stage, we must speak honestly about the thing that stands between you and it. And it is not other people. It was never, primarily, other people. There is a figure each of us wears into the world, a face assembled for public use, built from the expectations of family, culture, the thousand small negotiations of childhood. This face is not a lie exactly, it is a necessary garment, the coat you put on to walk outside, but it becomes a prison the moment you forget you are wearing it, the moment you believe the coat is the body beneath it. For the empath, this outer face is very often built around usefulness. You learn that your value lay in your capacity to soothe, to sense, to smooth the rough edges of other people's days. And so the face you wear says, I am here for you, I understand you, please in return understand me. But that final clause is spoken so softly, so wrapped in the giving that precedes it, that almost no one ever hears it. Beneath that face lies another territory, one you have very likely spent years avoiding, because it does not flatter you the way your empathy does. It is the storehouse of everything you decided long ago was unacceptable in yourself. Your rage, your need, your envy of the people who never had to earn their belonging, your exhaustion with being endlessly understanding while remaining endlessly misunderstood. This storehouse does not disappear because you refuse to visit it. It grows in the dark and it speaks to you in symptoms, in the resentment that surprises you, in the tears that arrive over something small because they were never allowed to arrive over the large thing, in the bone deep tiredness that no amount of rest seems to touch. Here is what I have come to believe after long observation of the human interior. You cannot be understood by another person to any greater depth than you have first understood yourself. This is not a moral failing. It is closer to a law of physics. The parts of you that you have refused to face cannot be offered to another person for their comprehension. They can only leak out sideways, in defensiveness, in the small wars you did not mean to start, in the love you give that somehow always tastes underneath like a plea. You have been asking the world to understand a version of you that even you have not fully met. This is not an accusation. It is the hinge on which everything I am about to say will turn, because once you see it, once you truly see that the ache to be understood by others was all along a displaced ache to understand and accept yourself, the entire architecture of your suffering becomes something you can actually work with. You are not at the mercy of other people's willingness to see you. You hold in your own hands the one instrument capable of finally, finally, seeing you back. I want to tell you what this work looks like, because it is not abstract and it is not comfortable, and anyone who tells you it can be done gently in a single weekend is selling you something. It begins with turning toward the very feelings you have spent your life managing on other people's behalf, and for once directing that same attention inward, the rage you have never let yourself feel because you were too busy being understanding, the grief for every relationship where you gave the deep listening you never received. the shame that whispers, still in the smallest hours, that if people really knew you, the tired parts, the needy parts, the parts that get sick of being everyone's safe harbor, they would leave. You must sit with these, not to wallow, not to build a new identity out of your wounds, but to do the one thing that changes everything, to witness yourself with the same unflinching, non judgmental attention you have offered every other soul who ever sat across from you in pain. Do you understand what a strange and radical act that is for someone like you? You have spent a lifetime being the witness. You have almost never let yourself be witnessed, not even by yourself. And so this turning inward is not selfish, whatever the old voice tells you. It is the repayment of a debt owed to the one person who has been waiting longest for your attention. You, as you do this work, something begins to shift that is difficult to describe to someone who has not felt it, so I will try anyway. The parts of yourself you once needed to hide from others because you were terrified they would confirm your worst fear about yourself begin slowly to lose their power to frighten you, not because they vanish, they do not vanish. Your rage is still your rage, your need is still your need. But you have met them now, you have sat in the room with them, and a thing that has been fully met no longer needs to be managed from a distance, disguised, apologized for. You begin to carry yourself the way a person carries a house they have walked through every room of, with the calm, unspectacular authority of someone who is no longer afraid of what might be behind a closed door, because they have opened every door themselves. This is the beginning of the final stage, though you will not recognize it as such while you are inside it. It rarely announces itself. It arrives the way morning arrives, not as an event, but as a gradual and undeniable change in the light. Let me tell you what changes concretely, because I do not want to leave you with poetry alone when you deserve substance. You will notice first that you have stopped rehearsing the endless internal drafting of explanations. If I say it this way, they'll finally get it. Begins almost without your choosing it, to fall silent. Not because you have given up on being clear, but because you no longer need the explanation to land in order to feel secure in what you know to be true about yourself. You can say a true thing once, plainly, and let it rest in the room without chasing it, without polishing it, without adding three more sentences to make sure it was received the way you intended. This alone, if you have lived your whole life as a translator, will feel like laying down a stone you did not realize you had been carrying for decades. You will notice, second, that other people's misreadings of you begin to cost less. Someone will mistake your quiet for coldness, your boundary for cruelty, your tiredness for indifference, and in the old life this would have sent you into hours of anguished reconstruction, trying to find the words that would set the record straight. In the new life, something else happens. A kind of internal steadiness registers the misreading, feels the old familiar pull to explain, and then, this is the miracle of it, declines, not out of coldness, out of a settled knowledge that you know what is true, and their perception, however sincerely held, does not have the authority to overwrite that knowledge. You will find you can let someone be wrong about you and still sleep soundly that night. This was, for most of your life, unimaginable. You will notice, third, and this is the one that surprises people most, that your relationships do not become smaller, they become larger. Because here is the secret. Nobody tells you about the endless project of trying to be understood. It was quietly exhausting, the very connections it was meant to deepen. Every relationship carried the invisible weight of your unmet need, and the people in your life, even the ones who loved you, could feel that weight, even if they could not name it. When you stop needing them to understand you in order to feel whole, something in the relationship exhales. You are free to love them for who they actually are, rather than auditioning them for the role of the one who will finally see you. And strange as it sounds, this is when the people capable of real understanding tend to arrive, not because you finally found the right words, but because you stopped performing your worth and simply were it, and presence like that draws its own kind of company. I want to say something now about solitude, because the final stage is often mistaken from a distance for loneliness, and the two are not remotely the same country. Loneliness is the ache of a door you keep knocking on that will not open. Solitude, the kind I am describing, is the settled peace of a person who has stopped needing any particular door to open, because they have built, within themselves, a room that no longer depends on entry from outside. This is not resignation dressed up as wisdom. It is not the bitter self-sufficiency of someone who has given up on people. It is something far warmer, though it takes real courage to arrive at. The discovery that you can hold your own hand in the dark, that you can be your own witness when no one else is available to witness you, that the understanding you spent a lifetime seeking outside yourself was in its deepest form always waiting to be granted from within. There will be people in your life, I promise you this, because it has been true for every empathic soul who has ever walked this road before you, who will never fully understand you, who will love you imperfectly and read you incorrectly and occasionally wound you by mistake, and whom you will choose to keep loving anyway, not because you need their comprehension to feel secure, but because love does not actually require total understanding in order to be real. This is one of the great and liberating discoveries of the final stage. Understanding and love are not the same currency. You have been conflating them your whole life. Love, it turns out, can survive, can even flourish in the presence of mystery, in the presence of two people who will never fully translate each other, and who choose again and again to stay in the room anyway. That is not a lesser love. It may be the only kind of love mature enough to last. I want to speak now to the part of you that is afraid this all sounds like coldness. I know that fear. I have sat with people who, hearing a message like this one, worry that becoming someone who no longer needs to be understood means becoming someone who stops caring whether they are understood. A hardening, a closing off, a slow walk toward isolation dressed up in the language of growth. That is not what I am describing to you, and I want to be as clear about this as language allows. The empath who reaches the final stage does not stop caring about connection. They stop depending on it for their sense of self. There is a difference so vast, it changes the entire shape of a life. A person who needs to be understood in order to feel real will contort themselves endlessly trying to earn that understanding, will grow bitter when it is withheld, will mistake being agreed with for being loved. A person who no longer needs to be understood in order to feel real is, paradoxically, free to seek understanding for its own sake, as a gift offered and received between two whole people, rather than a rescue mission for a self that cannot stand without it. The first kind of connection is a transaction. The second is communion. You have spent your life capable of communion with everyone but yourself. The final stage simply completes the circle. And here is something I have watched happen again and again, something that still moves me every time I witness it. The empath who arrives at this stage does not become less compassionate, they become more, because compassion that flows from a place of unmet need is always, underneath, a little bit desperate. It is looking, even while giving, for something in return. Compassion that flows from a place of wholeness asks for nothing. It simply gives, cleanly, without the silent invoice attached. People feel this difference even when they cannot name it. They will tell you that being around you feels different now, steadier, less like being needed, and more like being met. That is not you loving them less, that is you finally loving them and yourself from solid ground. Let me be honest with you about the cost of this, because I do not believe in growth that pretends to be free. There will be a grief in this process, and you should let yourself feel it rather than rush past it. You will grieve the fantasy, the old, deep fantasy, that if you just kept trying, kept explaining, kept refining your words and your patience, the people who could not understand you would eventually come around. Some of them will not, some of them never will, not because you failed, but because understanding you was never within their capacity or their will, and no version of your explanation, however perfect, could have changed that. Releasing that fantasies is a real loss, and it deserves real mourning, not the brisk, forced positivity our culture likes to slap over every ending. You will also grieve the identity you built, around being the understanding one, the safe one, the one who always finds the words for everyone else's pain. That identity earned you love, or something that resembled love, for a very long time. Setting it down, or rather, holding it more lightly, wearing it as a gift you offer rather than a role you are trapped in, can feel, at first, like losing your place in the world. It is not a loss, it is a promotion you did not know you were eligible for. But it will feel for a while like walking without a familiar crutch, and you may stumble. Let yourself stumble. The final stage is not a plateau you arrive at and stand on perfectly forever. It is a direction you keep walking in, sometimes gracefully, sometimes not, for the rest of your life. I want to close with something practical, because inspiration without instruction tends to evaporate by morning. When you next feel the old pull, the desperate hope that if you just explain yourself one more time, someone will finally get it, pause and ask yourself a single question. Am I trying to be understood, or am I trying to feel safe? Very often it is the second thing wearing the mask of the first. And if it is safety you are after, there is a shorter road to it than another person's comprehension. That road runs directly through you. Sit with yourself, name the feeling without an audience. Offer yourself the same unhurried attention you have offered strangers in their worst moments. You already know how to do this. You have been doing it for other people your entire life. Tonight, and every night after, I am asking you to turn that gift homeward. And when someone in your life misunderstands you, as they will, because misunderstanding is simply the tax every human relationship pays for being made of two entirely different inner worlds, try just once, let it pass without the old campaign to correct it. Not because their perception is right, not because you do not matter enough to defend yourself, but because you are practicing a new kind of strength, one that does not require external ratification to remain standing. Watch what happens in your body when you do this. It will feel, at first, like danger. Stay with it anyway. On the other side of that discomfort is a peace no explanation has ever once given you. So let me say plainly what I believe the final stage actually is, stripped of all metaphor. It is the moment an empathic soul, exhausted from a lifetime of translating itself for an audience that could not always receive the translation, turns around and offers that same devoted attention to the one person who was there for every single version of the story, themselves. It is not the end of caring what others think, it is the end of needing others to think a particular thing in order to feel whole. It is not withdrawal from the world, it is the return to the world as a whole person rather than a hopeful applicant for other people's approval. And it is not, whatever it may look like from the outside, a colder way of living. It is, I promise you, the warmest one, because only a person who no longer needs love to be proven can actually receive it undefended, exactly as it is offered, without spending half of every embrace bracing for its end. You do not need one more person to finally understand you before you are allowed to feel whole. You are allowed right now, tonight, as you are, unexplained, unproven, entire. Go and live like you believe that. The world has had enough of your explanations. What it has been waiting for all along is simply you, steady, unhidden, no longer asking permission to exist exactly as you are.